Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining Sterling for part 3 of our Cybersecurity Webinar Series. In the past 2 webinars, we visited with the survivor of a destructive nation-state cyber attack. We dug deeper into the zero trust methodology, bringing a lot of hope to all of you in the audience. But today, we are going into the mind of a hacker. This webinar is being recorded for all of you in attendance, and the link will be provided to you after the event. If you have any questions at any time, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we will get to them as soon as we can. I would like to start off today by introducing 2 amazing speakers. Featured by Forbes as one of the 20 hackers who shaped history, Keren Elazari is an internationally acclaimed security researcher, author, and strategic analyst with an extensive experience in the international cybersecurity industry. Keren has worked with leading Israeli security firms, government organizations, Big 4 firms, Fortune 500, and groundbreaking startup companies in navigating complex cybersecurity issues. Keren holds a CISSP certification and a master's in security studies, and is a senior researcher at the Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center at Tel Aviv University in Israel. In 2014, Keren was the first Israeli woman to speak at TED, and her TED Talk remains one of the most viewed in the category of security and hacking of all times. Keren is the founder of Israel's largest security research community besides TLV and the Leading Cyber Ladies, a global professional network for women in cybersecurity. Our next guest, Stevan Bernard, is currently the Chief Executive of Bernard Global. Prior to this, he served as the Executive VP of Global Protection Services at Sony Pictures Entertainment for almost 20 years. He and his staff covered 50 countries with 150 offices. A few of his responsibilities included global threat management, investigations, forensics, information security and data privacy, content protection, major event security, business continuity planning, crisis management, and incident management. Stevan oversaw all security aspects of the North Korean cyber attack that took place on Sony Pictures. We are honored to have Keren and Stevan join us today. Welcome to both of you. Stevan, I would love to hand the program over to you at this time.
Thank you, Mindy, and thank you very much, Keren, for joining today. What we did decide to do, Sterling and us, was to spare all of you the typical slideshow presentation and actually just have a rich and engaging conversation. And it's really my pleasure to be able to interview Keren, who I first met in London, and then she invited me to Tel Aviv University to be a keynote speaker a couple of years ago now, but it was a great time where Keren interviewed me. So now we get to flip it around and I get to interview Keren. And, you know, if you don't know of her, you will. As Mindy said, an author, analyst, researcher, advisor, speaker, but a friendly hacker, I'll use that term. And we'll tell you a little bit more about what that means, which is very important to the future of our digital economies. So Keren, from age 14, you were first drawn to digital world and cyber and security. Why and how and what happened? Tell us about it.
That's right. Actually, even before I was 14, Stevan. And thank you so much, Stevan and Sterling, for inviting me to share my point of view with everybody today. I'm excited to tell you about the world of the friendly hackers, because that's where I've been, that's where I come from. And that's how I've always seen the cybersecurity landscape, from that friendly hacker point of view. So Stevan, you asked why, as a young girl, I became fascinated with it. I could tell you I was born curious. I was always a very, very curious little girl. I asked my parents so many questions about everything, about the world, that if I'm being completely honest, instead of a bedtime story, I would usually get volumes of the encyclopedia. True story. I was a really geeky, nerdy girl, and I was always curious for more information. And I discovered that through the internet, when we first got access to the internet in Tel Aviv, in Israel, that it would be a pathway, a portal to all of the world's information, but it required me to know how to use it. And there wasn't anyone around to really teach me, not at school, not my parents. The internet was a new thing. So I had to learn by myself. I was a self-starter. I built websites by analyzing other people's websites. I browsed the internet, I asked questions, and sometimes the answers to my many questions happened to be on a password protected website or on a computer server that wasn't exactly accessible. So I had to teach myself how to get there. And I didn't quite realize it was called hacking, not until I met Angelina Jolie. So she was my first hacker mentor. When I was 14, I saw her in the Hollywood film Hackers. I actually have the soundtrack for it right here. And this is the CD soundtrack for the movie. And I want to show this to everyone because you see the group of hackers, you see these kids. I didn't really look like this, but I really identified with this kind of hacker, a high school weirdo who's too smart for, the rest of the kids, who's not interested in the same things as other kids. But through the use of computers and through the understanding of this new thing, the internet, the hackers in this movie ended up as the heroes. The high school kids were the heroes. If you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, they're not the bad guys. They're the ones who actually uncover corruption, they stop an ecological catastrophe. In fact, for those of you who've seen the movie, you'll remember they deal with a ransomware virus in 1995. That's way before ransomware became a problem for all of us. So the movie really captured my imagination, Stevan. And as a young girl, I saw that all of my activities, my curiosity, my passion for technology, for the internet, it's actually called being a hacker. So Hollywood taught me everything I knew, and I followed in the footsteps of my Hollywood heroes. I took up computer classes. I started an after-school job at a computer store where I met some more hackers. I started participating in online chat rooms, talking to other hackers around the world. And I never saw it as a criminal activity. I saw it as something that's driven by curiosity. Now, later on in my career, when it was my time to join the Israeli military, as most men and women do by the age of 18, I got my chance to use some of that hacker mindset and my hacking skills to help my country and to help defend the military's networks and technologies. So that really gave me that maybe strategic point of view, because I came in with a lot of knowledge and curiosity about technologies and about the shenanigans that hackers could get up to if the devices or the networks were not secured. But the government and the military showed me the big picture and to think strategically. So those are my origins. That's where I come from. That's my origin story. And I'm proud to say that for more than 20 years, almost 25 years now, I guess the movie came out in 95. I've been in this space and I haven't been bored for a single day. It's fascinating, it's challenging, and it's very interesting and rewarding. So thank you for inviting me to share my point of view.
Do you feel that the hacker community and hacktivists actually push the internet to become stronger and healthier? And if so, how?
I absolutely do. And in most cases, hackers have already helped us out. The friendly hackers out there have reported on vulnerabilities, have pushed companies to build better, safer technology. And that's why in my TED Talk, I claim that in some cases, hackers have been acting as an immune system for the digital age, just like the friendly bacteria in our personal immune systems and the friendly organisms that actually help protect us. So in the past few years, since I took up my position as a researcher with Tel Aviv University, I've really dedicated my time to specifically how friendly hackers are helping. And I looked at bug bounty programs, I looked at disclosures, I looked at hacktivism. And while we often hear in the news about malicious hackers, cyber criminals, spies, terrorists, we don't often hear the stories of how a hacker found a vulnerability in a popular Facebook product or an airline webpage or a financial systems application. And these are the stories that are happening all the time. In fact, just the past year, we've all been under lockdown restrictions. We've all been adapting to the new normal. It turns out it was actually quite a productive year for friendly hackers. So being stuck at home actually meant that in 2020, hackers reported more vulnerabilities than ever before. There's now more than 1 million hackers that are registered on platforms for bug bounties, for disclosing vulnerabilities. And actually more high criticality, high risk vulnerabilities have been discovered as well. So just as so many companies have been shorthanded, adapting to a new digital reality, opening up remote connections, creating more more attack surface for the bad guys, friendly hackers have been stepping up. So I really absolutely believe in this. And it's one of my most important messages for everyone. Friendly hackers can help, and they're already helping many of us all the time, even if we don't realize it.
You know, very interesting. This week, we heard from CISA, which is a US organization that's really a cybersecurity support mechanism for all of us, that they announced they're going to go to a VDP program, which is vulnerability disclosure policy for US government. So what that really becomes, I think, is, and Keren, please comment on it, it's an invitation to the hacker community to really take another look at all government agencies, what vulnerabilities they might have, to report them, and to do so even anonymously for the betterment of that. So I think it absolutely illustrates what you've just been saying about friendly hackers and how they can help.
Absolutely. And you know, the CISA announcement is fantastic. It's incredible, but it's not groundbreaking. The US government has been working with hackers in a variety of ways for at least 5 to 6 years. So the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, has had a Hack the Pentagon program since 2016, where they invited hackers to disclose vulnerabilities. They now have, there's Hack the Air Force, Hack the Marines, Hack the Army, and actually there's a Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has a vulnerability disclosure framework. It's a very simple document. You could all read it. It's about 8 pages, and they put it out back in 2017. And now we're seeing that more and more government agencies are starting to work with vulnerability disclosure programs, or VDPs, or with bug bounty programs. Now, the two terms are not exactly interchangeable, because with bug bounty programs, there's usually a bounty, there's usually a reward. With vulnerability disclosure programs, what the federal government is saying, every major federal agency needs to have some format for individual hackers to report vulnerabilities and to disclose vulnerabilities. But they're not going to necessarily force or mandate the reward element, the bounty. That's where bug bounty programs are a little bit different. Now, the reward, I just want to show you a couple of these. The reward doesn't have to be monetary, doesn't have to be financial. So some organizations, including the Pentagon and companies like Tesla, give out these challenge coins. So these are challenge coins. This is the one I got from, actually from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Hopefully you can all see it well. I hope my camera can focus on it. And it's really cool. It makes me feel great. I don't know how much it cost them to make this, but it's not a monetary reward. I can't use this coin to buy anything at my local cafe, but it actually has reputational value in the hacker community. And the Tesla challenge coins are really very sought after, because only a select few elite hackers have ever received the Tesla challenge coins. I know a couple that have. And this is a way for an organization, a government agency, or an innovative company like Tesla to really create engagement with this community. And I think it really highlights the fact these are not people that are looking for a monetary remuneration. They're not looking for money. They could have used their knowledge and their skills to make money nefariously or legally. What they're driven by is curiosity. They're driven by their passion to see something in the world and get it fixed. This is something that really defines a lot of friendly hackers, is that we can't leave things alone. And as a kid, I never could leave things alone. I've got a lot of stories about crawling under tables and disconnecting cables and pushing buttons, and a lot of fun for my parents, obviously. But that's the kind of mindset that these programs encourage. Now, on the other hand, criminals and spies don't require an invitation, and they don't respond to one. When the Pentagon started Hack the Pentagon back in 2016, From the moment the program was launched until they received their first valid report, it only took 13 minutes. So just imagine for how many weeks or months a vulnerability was viable on a Pentagon website or a public-facing system. So the friendly hackers also have that power to identify things that are in the blind spot for even the most secure organizations out there. So even the Pentagon missed a few bugs, but the outsider hacker identified it quickly. So that's why that outsider mindset, the different mindset, is so incredibly helpful.
Thanks. So I think especially, probably there's nobody here that isn't a little bit worried about ransomware and criminality in our digital worlds that we all live in. But maybe you could tell us a little more about how are victims selected and why? And obviously the why is, you know, whether it's a nation state that wants to do espionage or a bad guy that wants to steal something or an insider who is mad at their employer and wants to sabotage, but obviously a lot of different reasons. But for the most part, how are we selected as victims?
Wow, a fascinating question. So I'm going to give you my point of view on this. And Steven, feel free to stop me because I've got a lot of ideas. And just this morning, I participated in a seminar hosted by the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, the financial authority here in Israel, talking about some of the recent attacks that we have experienced here in Israel, which have targeted both the financial sector, but also insurance companies, defense companies, and a lot of other companies in between. So traditionally, or if I could say classically, ransomware was very opportunistic. In the first couple of instances of ransomware that we saw 3 years ago or 4 years ago, even one of the first cases I remember was from, I think, 2017 or 2016, 2015. They were very opportunistic. Attackers had access to a computer system of an organization, and they tried to extract value by demanding the ransom payment for the encrypted files. And fairly quickly, most organizations, if not all, realize that backups are the key to prevent the viability of this line of attack. Then attackers figured out they have to be innovative. They have to change their game. And that's why in the past few years, certainly in the past year and a half, in the past 18 months or 20 months, we're seeing attacks on organizations that can't afford even a couple hours of downtime. So we're seeing attacks on big whales like hospital and healthcare systems, like insurance providers, like infrastructure, like energy and gas. We all heard about the Colonial Pipeline attack from just a few weeks ago. Food manufacturers, big organizations that have massive either factories or a financial setup or a healthcare setup where the network is very large, it's very complex. It offers a lot of opportunities for the bad guys to get in, and it offers a lot of opportunities for monetization because the ransomware gangs are really, really focused on revenue. And they're really, they're really thinking like very savvy businessmen. From a lot of the groups that have launched ransomware attacks in the past year, we're seeing they have branding, they have logos, they have a customer support chat to facilitate the ransomware negotiation. They're willing to give ransomware demand discounts. So, or on the other hand, they offer ultimatums. Pay us within 48 hours or the price doubles. Pay us within 48 hours to get a special price. They're using all kinds of business tactics. And once they realize that a lot of these organizations can't afford to spend the downtime to get back from a backup, that's where they really focused attacks on these types of targets, the bigger targets that can't afford any downtime. But even for smaller organizations or even the ones that have great backups, that's where the criminals brought in the leak innovation. So that's something we started seeing back in 2019. It's not just ransomware attack. We're going to encrypt your information and require ransom. It's also the threat of if you don't pay us, we're going to leak your information to everybody else. And this is specifically designed for those types of companies who think, well, if we get hit by ransomware, we'll just restore everything from backups and we're good to go. So specifically for that kind of victim, the criminals have the leak sites where they feature the information leaked from their targets. Groups like Maze, for example, featured information from consumer electronic companies like Canon and LG. Other groups have set up Telegram accounts, Twitter accounts. Here in Israel, we had a major case with an insurance provider, and the attacker actually reached out to journalists proactively, telling journalists about the attack, saying they want to give the company a chance, but if they don't pay by such and such, there'll be an ultimatum. Now, what they're doing, they're not just going for fame and glory. They want to use the public opinion as further leverage to put that company on the spot, so that they would be further, hopefully, incentivized to pay the ransom, because now they're splashed all over the headlines of the news. So the attackers have really evolved, not just the technologies, not just the malware brands that they use to get into computers or the access mechanisms. They've really evolved their thinking. Certainly in the past year, I just want to add one more final thought. In the past year, we have to understand that with 2020, with lockdowns, a lot of traditional crime groups, organized crime, lost access to many of their regular revenue streams, whether that's smuggling or human trafficking or drugs or other types of illicit, nefarious criminal activities. And so these organized crime groups realized if everybody's gone online, we are going to go online as well. And it's created this renaissance for criminals. So you have the old school cyber criminals who have been in the game for, let's say, 5 years. And now you've got the fresh cyber criminals that have joined in the past year, and they don't really need to know a lot about ransomware because they are ransomware as a service operators that would bring them in as affiliates in exchange for a cut of the revenue. So they don't have to be specialized expert technology cyber criminals. They can buy the attack tools, the kits, everything from the criminals that have already developed them over the past few years. So that's another phenomenon we've seen the past year. And I know it doesn't necessarily relate to how they choose their victims, but I wanted to provide you with this insight with regards to how these criminals operate. Very savvy business people. Yes, they're opportunistic, but they also think about their target. They also think about whether this is a target that can afford to pay the ransom, a target that can't afford any downtime, a target that can be squeezed because of leaks or media leverage, or in some cases by turning the company's clients against them. So sending emails to clients of a company that has been hacked and asking the clients to call the company and encourage them to pay. That's another thing I've seen in the past year. So that's a little bit about the target selection from the criminal point of view.
Can you comment on, well, let me just make a comment and I'll ask you to jump in here.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrency and blockchain. Those were not created to enable criminal actors to do bad things. They were created for good. However, there's been an unintentional consequence of that seems to be fueling ransomware especially. What are your thoughts on it? Where's it going?
Well, so such a critical question, especially at this point in time. So personally, I've always been a very big believer in the potential of cryptocurrency technologies and Bitcoin. And I don't think that the technology in of itself is malicious or nefarious, or that it is necessarily criminal or suitable for criminal activities. I want to remind everybody that criminals still love the US dollar, the greenback, cash. There's still quite a lot of crime that takes place in the world using cash, and probably has always been that way. And what's actually fascinating is that because a lot of ransomware uses Bitcoin as the payment, we actually have more visibility. We know how many transactions have taken place. And even the FBI recently announced that they were able to actually retrieve some of the funds that were paid in the colonial pipeline. So in some cases, actually the transparency offered by the blockchain concept is more than we might have had in the past. So ransomware existed before Bitcoin was popular. And in some ransomware grifts, the attackers tried to get paid by e-gold or via PayPal or a number of other online payment schemes and tricks. It certainly has helped them, I will agree. It has helped make life easier for criminals. What I predict we're going to see in the future is criminals will move from classic cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to some of the altcoins or the alternative coins, and specifically one coin which has been quite popular with the hacker community and the cyber criminal community is a coin called Monero. The code for that is XMR. And XMR, Monero, is allegedly harder to track down, more anonymous, more privacy oriented than Bitcoin. And I do think we're going to see more ransom demands in XMR. Now, just to cap it off, ironically, I think one of the reasons that Bitcoin has risen in price, and you won't hear anybody else say this, but it's a thesis I have. One of the reasons that Bitcoin has grown in value in the past 2 years is also because companies are quietly buying some Bitcoin so that they have it on hold in case they have to pay a ransom demand, not just as an asset to include in their investment portfolio, but also kind of like having a ransomware insurance policy, having a couple of Bitcoins in the doomsday folder so that they're ready for dealing with an attack. That's a theory, and I don't have anything to back it up, I'll admit, but I think it's something also to remember. The currency itself is not malicious or criminal. It's a technology, just like any other technology. Of course, it's adopted by criminals. And again, a reminder, they are innovative, they are savvy. Any new technology that's going to be created, criminals are going to be some of the first people to be identifying how it can be used for malicious gains or leverage. And that's been the truth of humanity, unfortunately, since the first technology was ever invented by human beings. Bitcoin is not unique in that sense, and digital technology is not unique in that sense. It's maybe just easier for the bad guys to exploit.
So during COVID, the word hygiene became really important to all of us and still is, but let's extend that term to cyber. So cyber hygiene, how would you advise the audience today on what is good cyber hygiene? What should we be doing?
That's a great topic. And I think we have an opportunity because of COVID. Hygiene is not just popular, it's something that's suddenly on the top of our minds all the time, right? We've all had to get ready for new habits, washing our hands, maintaining social distancing, putting on masks, sanitizing, etc. So in the digital realm, we can talk about our personal cyber hygiene and we can talk about our organizational cyber hygiene. And I want to give just a few pointers in brief. So on the personal front of cyber hygiene, 3 basic things. And I'm sure many of you have heard these before. It might not be the sexiest advice, but it actually is going to help you be safer. So keeping your operating systems up to date, not just on your laptop, not just on your phone, also on your router, the firmware of your router or the firmware of your firewall, if you have such a device at home or in the office. So operating systems are the same. They're as important as the firmware in our routers, and they're one of the access vectors that bad guys get in. So keeping our operating systems up to date, that's probably the analogy to getting vaccinated when you have access to a vaccine. The second thing is we've all learned to keep our masks on, right? And we would never use a mask and then give somebody else the same mask that we just used. So why are we doing the same thing with our digital accounts and with our passwords? We're recycling passwords all the time. Everybody does this. I know this for a fact. There are studies and research done on massive databases of usernames and passwords. People reuse passwords all the time. If you can stop reusing passwords, especially in your important, crucial accounts, it's going to help you be that much safer, that much harder as a target. And I want to, recommend that it's maybe like a COVID mask. It's something that should be changed often, shouldn't be shared around, right? Think about it like that. The third thing I want to mention is also about access. So now everybody's working remotely. Are we using our personal device or our corporate device for everything that we're accessing? And are we allowing our family members or our friends or the people who are living with us to use that same device for everything? So in the same way that we wouldn't, just come into a room right now and just shake everybody's hands, right? We're not going to do that again. At least I don't think I'm going to do that. This morning, I had a chance to practice some handshaking, and I ran to the sanitizer in between every opportunity I could. So in the same way, you wouldn't just, log into your work device and then let everybody in your household use that access to get into their school stuff or their entertainment stuff. Trying to maintain some hygiene there. So those are my ideas on the personal front. In the organizational level, it becomes more complex. But when we talk about cyber hygiene on the organizational level, we also talk about updating operating systems. We talk about passwords and maybe moving away from passwords and into more secure, complex authentication mechanisms. And hopefully, Stevan, we can talk more about that because I've got a few great examples. But we also talk about some basic cyber hygiene in the organization. Like, for example, an employee has left, disable and disavow all of their access tokens, their usernames, their devices, whatever is associated with them. Don't leave any active accounts available for somebody that doesn't work in the company anymore. So that's something we've seen happen quite a lot. On the other front, it's things like having open access mechanisms that are not secure. So I'll give you an example. Some of you might have heard about Electronic Arts, EA. It's a big video game company. I think they make the FIFA games, the soccer games, and the Madden football games, and a few others. And they recently got breached. And the source, the first access that the attackers had was through Slack. So the company had Slack set up for all of their employees, and they had it set up in such a way that if an employee had the right cookies on their computer, they would log into Slack immediately. Now, that didn't allow them full access into the organization, but that cookie was enough for the attackers to get into Slack and start a conversation with one of the tech people working in the company. And they basically social engineered them into giving them a new access token into further organizational systems. So we had several failures here. We had the use of this chat system basically to identify an employee. Just because somebody was in the chat, that doesn't mean that's really that employee. It could easily be an attacker masquerading as that employee, as that's exactly what happened. We had the tech support staff issue them with new access credentials without verifying their identity on any other channels outside of Slack. So that is poor cyber hygiene in my point of view. We could talk about network shares. We could talk about having open access in the sense of unsecured remote desktops, updating operating systems for access mechanisms, for firewalls, for VPNs. Here in Israel, a lot of the cases that were discussed in today's seminar were highlighted specifically a particular brand of firewall and remote access technology that had known vulnerabilities since 2019. However, companies did not update the software to patch for those vulnerabilities, and thereby the Israeli organizations got repeatedly hacked one after another, many of them using the same vulnerability. So this kind of case, maybe, Stevan, I'm sure you're familiar with the term a zero-day vulnerability. Many of the audience today has heard about a zero-day vulnerability. It's when there's a new bug, a new problem in a piece of software, and even the company that makes that software doesn't know about the bug, therefore it's not patched, there's no solution for it, and it could be used by attackers. And that's, a lot of sophisticated attackers will spend time and money and resources to research and find zero-day attacks against operating systems and applications. But when a bug has been around since 2019, and there's already an updated firmware version that closes that problem, that patches that problem, and it's still usable and viable for attackers, that's what we call a day one vulnerability or a day one attack, not a zero-day attack. You already had time to learn about it, more than one day. In the case of that particular attack, more than a year, you had time to patch your systems, but you didn't intake those new patches, thereby leaving the company vulnerable. So that is, again, poor cyber hygiene from my point of view. It's not good for your digital immune system.
Bad medicine.
Yeah,
all right.
That's right.
So I've had a couple of clients say to me, one in particular comes to mind. I'm a relatively small business. I operate in the US. I sell my products in the US. And I realize that the threat is coming oftentimes from overseas. I'm not so worried about it, because it can't really affect me. And my response is, are you online?
Yes.
I mean, we have to remember that everyone is within reach if they're digitally connected, right?
Absolutely. This is a global issue. It's not US or Israel or UK or France. And the attackers, they don't see boundaries in the same way. The only boundaries that a lot of attackers see are where they're based in a country that's giving them some shelter, or that's maybe not prosecuting, not enforcing cybercrime as best as they could. And there are some criminals who say, well, I'm happy, I'm going to stay here in this country for the rest of my life because I know I can't travel to Europe or to the US or here and there because I'm going to be a wanted felon. So I'm going to stay here in this country. So that's the kind of boundary that criminals do recognize, but they really don't care in terms of attacking a US-based company or Israeli-based company or European-based company. And actually, it's interesting. We do see that there are attack groups that specialize in specific sectors, but not necessarily in geographies, but rather industry sectors. And whether it's the financial sector, the healthcare sector, the energy sector, the entertainment sector, like you've experienced with Sony, of course, there are attacks that are maybe more sector specific, but not necessarily geographic in their point of view. Even the attacks that we were discussing this morning, a lot of those were originated or attributed to threat actors in Iran. They're not just going after Israeli targets, they're also going after American targets, they're going after Saudi targets, they're going after other targets as well.
So we could obviously spend a lot of time today and many days talking about all the negatives that are out there. But I think also we should look at what new technologies or trends are on the horizon that can be very positive for us and that you are excited about.
Oh, what a great question, Stevan. It's almost like I asked you to ask me that. So I'm really, really excited about a passwordless future. I'm super excited that there are several companies, both here in Israel and around the world, that are working to rid us of passwords. I think we should start calling them past words because they belong in our past. Passwords don't represent our current need for authentication. They don't authenticate people, applications, or devices in a way that's really suitable for the 21st century. Think about it yourself and everybody who's listening today. How many passwords do you have to use on a daily basis for your personal things, for your professional things? An average individual needs to use something between 20 and 40 passwords, depending on the way, how many different services they use. And that's absolutely ridiculous. No wonder people are recycling passwords because it's very difficult to keep up. Now, to add insult to injury, we're still using outdated advice on how the passwords should look like. So how many times have you heard that your password should have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols? The science on that is from 2003. 2003, that's ancient history in internet times. Even the guy who wrote that paper for NIST, for the American National Institute of Science and Technology, even he says that's no longer valid. If you still want to use passwords, they should be longer because that increases the time it takes a computer to crack them. The complexity doesn't increase it as much as the length, which is why maybe people should think about passphrases. But I'm personally excited about the technologies that are going to help us get rid of passwords altogether. So things like this, I want to show you, this is a YubiKey. It's made by a company called Yubico. I got this one specifically from Facebook and it's Facebook branded. This is what it looks like on the other side. You can connect it with USB, but it also has NFC, near field communication, and it's a secure access token. Now this one has Facebook branding, but I can actually link up my YubiKey with other accounts. I can actually link it up to my Google account, to my Facebook account. I also want to show you these guys, these little gadgets come in different form factors. This is what I got from Google. This is what you can get on the Google Advanced Protection Program. This one doesn't plug into your computer, it doesn't have USB. It actually uses wireless protocols, NFC and other wireless protocols, and you can actually charge it because it's got a battery. This one doesn't consume any power. It's like a USB drive, so it doesn't consume any power. It's passive. This one is more active, so you need to sometimes charge it up. But that's just to give you an example of these additional security tokens. They're not for they're not used by anyone today or by everyone today, but additional security layers like multi-factor authentication, it's been around for a while. It's not blazing new technology. If we can get more people to adopt multi-factor authentication, we could significantly raise the level of security. I recently heard research from Google, from Gmail, where they said that about only 10% of Gmail users sign up for two-step verification, where they receive an additional code to their phone, or to the, even lesser, maybe 1% or less than of Gmail users is signed up to the advanced protection program. But those mechanisms stop about 90% account takeovers in Gmail. Now, I know a lot of people use Gmail as their key to other keys. That's where they get the password resets to so many other services, right? We all do that. So think about how you could just make it so much safer. So I'm really excited about a passwordless future. There are other mechanisms. There's different types of biometrics that are on the horizon, including continuous behavioral biometrics, which I think is a fascinating field. I just recently learned some more about it. We can talk more about that later if it's interesting to people. That's something I'm excited about, because I think more and more people and companies and organizations are learning to, I've been talking about this for years. We need to move away from past words. They no longer represent our digital needs.
This next question, I think, is really appropriate for what we've been talking about, and we certainly need your view on it. If I'm an executive in an organization, how do I best optimize or utilize the hacker community for the good of my organization?
So that's a great question. I'm going to give you 3 ideas. 1, start by taking 1 day off. 1 day out of the 365 days, or, of course, less, because we don't work 365 days, but take 1 day out of your schedule to visit together with your security team or your security director. If you're in charge of security, bring 1 more person with you to visit and participate in person or virtually in a hacker community conference, a friendly hacker community conference like B-Sides, for example. I happen to run B-Sides Tel Aviv, but there are B-Sides events in hundreds of locations around the world, certainly across the US, in Nashville, in Florida, in Colorado, in San Francisco, in Austin, in Vegas, in New York, all across the US. There's so many different locations. And even if it's not called B-Sides Tel Aviv, security research community events or hacker community events could be a fantastic investment of your time. Just spend 1 day there. You'll see, you'll learn, you'll absorb. Maybe you'll find your next hire. Maybe you'll find the talent that you need. Just open your mind by spending 1 day there. That's the first advice. The second advice is going to be about looking on whether you can really engage with the hacker community in a vulnerability disclosure program or a bug bounty program through the ecosystem. So maybe through the partners that you work with, maybe via companies like Sterling, or maybe via other partners and companies that you work with that are bigger. They might have a program in place. Maybe you can use that to engage with the community. But at the very least, if your company has any public-facing website applications, have somewhere on the website or somewhere on your application, just a link that says, if you find a security problem, here's the email, security@ such and such company. Have that account up and running. And maybe you'll receive 5 bogus complaints, but you'll also receive valuable information. You do have to put some time to triage the information that comes in. I'm not going to tell you it's a magic bullet. There are no magic bullets. Certainly it requires time and attention, but just having that pathway for somebody to be able to report something to you, it oftentimes makes the difference. I speak to hackers all the time. They reach out to me on social media and they ask me, Keren, do you know somebody at company X? Can you help me reach their chief security officer or their chief technology officer? They have this problem in their website, in their application, in their system, and I can't get through. I can't find anybody to report it to. So just having that simple way for people to reach out to you could be the best way. The third piece of advice is try and hire a hacker. Try and hire somebody for your security team that brings the hacker mindset, that participates in this ecosystem, that participates in this community. Of course, it's not easy, and it requires maybe opening up to people that have alternative hairstyles like I do, or maybe listen to different kinds of music. But that kind of outsider mindset might be just what you need. So those would be my advices.
Keren, your perspective has not been disappointing today. I've heard it before. I'm glad that the audience has been able to hear from you. We're going to turn it back over to Mindy, and then we're going to come back so we have some time for questions and answers that I know are starting to surface here. So Mindy. Can't hear you.
Keren.
There.
Thank you so much, Keren. That was absolutely wonderful. We have a couple questions that have come in that I'd like to address to you. So one of the questions, we are a smaller university and we can't afford the fancy tools that are out there to help us with visibility into the activity on our network. Apart from cybersecurity training, what are some of the more affordable cybersecurity tools out there that we can adopt and that you would recommend?
Great question. So firstly, did I get it correctly? This is something from somebody from a university? Yes, somebody from a university.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
First of all, a lot of the fancy tools, a lot of the technology vendors do offer different pricing for academic organizations and educational organizations and nonprofit. However, you don't have to necessarily have those fancy tools. What you can do as an alternative, and I know a lot of organizations that do this, they take the time to learn a little bit more about open source technology that's available for defenders, and they bring that open source technology for free or for a symbolic fee, and they mostly have to spend, instead of the money, they have to spend the time in integrating and getting those open source devices to work. Now, we actually featured a talk by a blue team member, by a cybersecurity defender in Israel. We featured a talk about using free open source tools for some easy defensive wins. So I wanna look up the YouTube link to that and share that with everyone because it was in English. We featured that at B-Sides Tel Aviv last year. But there are actually lots of resources out there. There are talks that people do about how to use open source tools for security monitoring, for analysis, and they would even tell you what are the pros and cons of different devices. And you might even find that other academics and universities have had to use the same tricks. So I always talk about this concept of look within your neighborhood, your ecosystem. What some of your partner organizations, what might they be doing? How might they be defending themselves? And maybe you can get some ideas from there. So those are some ideas. I want to look it up and I'll be sure to share that link with everyone in the chat so that you can find that. Thanks for the question.
We have one other one here, Keren. Let me grab it. In the amount of change we've seen in the past 20 years, the amount of change we've seen in the past 20 years will be minor when compared to the next 20. From your perspective, what's on the horizon?
Wow, great question. I love looking beyond the horizon. I've always been so inspired by science fiction, and I think science fiction oftentimes deals with such questions. So if you want to know what humanity will be dealing with in 20, 30 years, I would recommend pick up some science fiction books. My personal favorite is Neal Stephenson, who, by the way, predicted Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies 10 years before it was a thing. And he also predicted that governments and criminals will be fighting for control over Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So Neal Stephenson wrote The Cryptonomicon in 1999. I think it's a fabulous book. It gives a great insight into, I guess, the world of now, which is why I read Neal Stephenson's latest book. I think his latest book is called Fall. And I see there maybe a prelude to what we're going to see in 10 and 20 years. And one of the things he discusses in that book is how, firstly, the rise of AI and the role of AI in human society, and how AI will be, really just a ubiquitous feature in our lives in many ways. But he also explores the notion of identity in a hyper digital reality. And I think that's going to be one of the next frontiers. That's going to be the next boundary, our personal identity, keeping our personal identity, identifying ourselves. It's not going to be with passwords. It's going to be with continuous biometrics. It's going to be proving ourselves to maybe an AI that's going to vet us. Are we really us all the time? So that's something that we might have to experience. And another thing that is featured in the book, and I hope it might sound very science fiction-y, but I hope it doesn't sound too wacky, but it's very interesting, is the idea of a digital afterlife. So that's really out there, right? But it's the idea that people will upload some of their being, I guess, their thoughts, their memories, their ideas, into a computer system that will be able to simulate them in a digital reality. And that digital reality will become perhaps even more central than our regular reality. Now that's very sci-fi, I admit, but it's interesting. It's interesting to read these books because they bring up these questions and they make us think about our present and our future. I certainly think the battle for our identity is crucial. I think we're going to see a much more globalized world, much more globalized than we have right now. So COVID, in the technical realm, COVID has really sent us back to kind of deglobalization because everybody had to really stay very, very local, and countries have closed up their borders and we didn't have as much international travel and supply chains were impacted. I do think that the future is going to become hyper global again. And definitely remote work is going to be the norm for many different types of work. And we're probably going to see absolutely new jobs and professions. And in the cybersecurity realm, a lot of people have said that cybersecurity is like medicine, where you have doctors that are specialized in different things, right? So in cybersecurity, you've got cryptography, you've got application security, you've got web application hacking, you've got network security, you've got red team testing, you've got hacking, but all of these specialties. I think probably in the next 20 years, we're going to see completely new types of jobs. So bug hunter is definitely going to be a job, but it's probably going to be a type of job that I can't even imagine yet, but somebody's already thinking about. Maybe AI hacking and anti-hacking specialties. That's probably going to be something. It's definitely being practiced and learned right now in academia. So learning how to use AI for cybersecurity and how to defend from automated attacks, that's probably going to be a very major specialty. It's a great question. I could talk about that for hours, but I'm going to send it back to you, Mindy, because I know we have a couple more questions today.
Thanks so much, Keren. And actually right now, I'm going to introduce Mike Fetaplace to come on and ask him to join our conversation here. So Mike's been working in the information technology and security industry for nearly 30 years, and he holds active CISSP and CISM certifications, as well as certifications from Microsoft, Cisco, Dell, and other top leading OEMs. Currently, Mike leads Sterling Cybersecurity Practice, and his team seeks to help our public and private sector customers manage their information and cybersecurity risks, and then also improve their security posture and preparedness. So Mike, we've had a lot of great talks with Keren, with Stevan today. We've had some great questions come in from the audience. Can you help explain to the audience how Sterling can assist them on their cybersecurity journey?
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. Appreciate it. And thank you, Keren and Stevan. Great information. So the good news is the cyber defense industry or community is here to help. Sterling Computers, a cybersecurity team, specifically provides services and solutions that really seek to help organizations protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of their information and systems. Our mission is really to help our customers understand their enterprise risk, deploy effective security measures, and reduce the time to detect and respond to threats as they occur. Our strategy generally aligns with standards such as the NIST cybersecurity framework and design principles such as zero trust, and there are others, of course. However, we customize them to each organization's specific requirements. We realize that one size rarely fits all. Regulatory requirements, industry-specific challenges, the nature of a customer's information assets, risk profile, and customer-specific priorities and objectives are all factored into our approach and the services and solutions we provide and deliver. And our strategy is importantly very risk appropriate. And what I mean by that is we never find ourselves recommending $1 million solution to a $10,000 risk. We really make sure that the strategies and programs and solutions we're deploying are appropriate to the risk we're protecting. So from a consulting perspective, we offer the standard services of assessment and gap analysis, strategy and program development, design and architecture, remediation and implementation, operation and optimization. Basically, what all that means to our clients is that we help our clients identify and understand their information assets and risks and what threats they face. We help them develop effective security strategies comprised of both administrative and technical controls, implement those strategies and solutions and programs, and manage and maintain them as needed. Our portfolio of solutions includes the standards such as end user awareness training, identity access management, perimeter and point security. However, what we really focus our efforts on is those differentiating technologies, the defensive solutions that address really the complex nature of today's security threats and what's coming for the future. You heard Keren kind of forecast what's coming at us. So we really seek to prepare our clients for those. So if we look at identity and secure remote access, microsegmentation, encryption to support those zero trust architectures, we then bring in solutions such as multi-factor authentication, which is really becoming pretty commonplace today. We really think they'll evolve into the password and continuous authentication solutions that Keren mentioned. In fact, if you aren't familiar yet with Gartner's continuous adaptive risk and trust assessment, CARTA for short, I think it's worth a read. I really see that CARTA approach evolving into the identity and access management authentication solutions and having a real impact on what we're going to see in the future. And importantly, these bad actors are increasingly using automation and artificial intelligence in their attacks, and quantum computing certainly come to play. So we really feel that we need to fight AI with AI. So we focus on our artificial intelligence-driven solutions such as network threat and anomaly detection, security automation and orchestration and response solutions. To combat that, we really need the mind and speed of a computer to keep up with the threats that are being delivered by those same technologies to really reduce the impact and the threat. And then another cool solution that's gaining traction, and really comes out of the world of some of the Colonial Pipeline and JBS breaches that have recently occurred, is cross-domain solutions to secure those IT, operational technology, and Internet of Things networks. And for those of you who aren't familiar with cross-domain, it's really a military grade concept of security that segments the networks based on use, completely isolates them, but facilitates a controlled and restricted ability to share the important data between those networks. I see those solutions evolving to really address those OT operational threats. And Sterling has experts and proprietary solutions that can assist with that kind of merger. So that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but we can really help to boil it down for your organization. If we can help, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to have a quick chat about where it is you are and where it is you're trying to get, and how we can help you achieve that. Thank you, Mindy.
Thanks so much, Mike. You bet. Keren, any final thoughts or comments for our audience today?
Yeah, I just remembered something that I want to share with everybody. And actually what Mike was talking about reminded me of that. So I also want everyone to learn about this concept called SBOM. And you've probably never heard about it before, but SBOM is an acronym for Software Bill of Materials. And it's also something that we're seeing the American government, the US government, push out right now as a recommendation and even as a requirement. And this is something that's a lesson learned, I think, from the SolarWinds breach, amongst other attacks. It's basically having a list of ingredients for everything that's in your technology stack. So I think about the fact that if I buy a candy bar today, I have a very clear list of ingredients, what has gone into that candy bar. And if I'm suddenly allergic or if there's a problem with any of those ingredients, we can identify that. We don't usually have that kind of visibility for our technology stack. And that's where the concept of a software bill of materials can become very, very helpful. It's an idea that the US government is championing. Specifically, I'm going to send everybody a link to the NTIA. That's one of the US agencies that's really championing this idea. Be sure to check it out. And I know it might not sound like the most exciting idea out there, but it's actually quite exciting. And I think more organizations can benefit from a software bill of materials concept. So what Mike was just discussing reminded me of that. Thanks for allowing me one more minute of your time. Thank you, Mindy, and thank you, Stevan and Mike and everybody.
You are most welcome, Keren. I just want to extend my gratitude as well, and from Sterling to you, Keren, to Stevan, to Mike, for all your insight this morning. It really is greatly appreciated. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us over the past few months on our Cybersecurity Webinar Series. We've enjoyed taking you on our cybersecurity journey. And if this is the first webinar that you've joined us on, please go to sterling.com/cybersecurity, watch part 1, part 2, take the cybersecurity preparedness assessment, and then download the new cybersecurity checklist that covers 15 ways to protect your organization from a cyber attack. That's brand new from this series here today. And if you're at all interested in a secure discovery call or assessment that Mike talked about here, contact us at connect@sterling.com or call 877-242-4074. So thank you again for your time today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day and a secure day. Thank you so much.